Welcome to the Paddle Pursuit Podcast, a podcast about paddle racing, the community, equipment, and everything else we can think of. Thank you so much for joining us today, and let's get started. All right, we're officially here. We've done everything we needed to create a podcast for the community at large. I'm here today, Robert Norman, with Christina Gonzalez, my future wife, but depending on when you're watching this, might be my current wife or my ex-wife.
No.
We discussed that joke beforehand, and her initial reaction was much better.
Well, you spoiled it.
So thank you guys so much for joining us here on the Paddle Pursuit. This is our first episode, my first podcast ever. As a disclaimer, 3 months ago, I didn't think I was ever going to do a podcast, and I've gotten talked into it, and that was my New Year's resolution. So I did not go to college for communication or sound engineering or advertising. So I'm just kind of a regular guy trying to go through this. So there's a lot of things that we're going to learn through this first podcast, and it is up to you listening or watching this to let us know any tips or things that you want to see or things that you can't stand, whatever it is. This is a community built and organized podcast, and this is for you all specifically. So the main premise is spotlighting people that are within the community and kind of uniting paddling as a whole. Because right now, paddle racing is very niche. Right? There's not many of us on the planet, but we're splintered into different little factions. I do kayak racing, downriver, ultra long distances, or I race canoes between Hawaiian islands only when the wind is blowing. And these are all totally different communities. And you have Dragon Boat and OC6 and single racers and tandem racers and downriver and course racers and downwind. There's so many facets, and most communities don't know that the other one exists. And they are just as fascinating as the one that you may partake in. So this podcast, that is the overall goal, is bringing light to all of that, as well as talking about equipment or whatever it is, right? We're here to have a good time, give you guys some content, and just kind of take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, we all have something in common, and that's that we face the direction that we are going, and we don't row. So, well, some people might row, but we're talking about paddling here.
That's right. So we just waged war on the rowing community. If you can't see where you're going, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's like racing a car backwards. Like, what is going on with that? So don't even get me started with the rowing community. And if you row, I still love you. All right, so we're just going to jump right into it. So normally we would have somebody here, and I would be interviewing and kind of running the show. But we're kind of switching the paradigm to bring light onto K2N as a whole and myself as a whole. Inside of the Central Florida area specifically, most people know who I am and so on. But outside of that, I'm mostly unknown outside of the YouTube presence and whatnot. So hopefully this podcast can kind of shed some more, intimate light on Robert Norman. And Christina is going to kind of spearhead the interviewing process.
Well, first of all, what is K2N and what does it stand for?
K2N, yeah. So it is a acronym for Kanala Nui. And if you're in Hawaii, right, it's really easy to pronounce that. But when you're in Inverness, Florida, and you paddle on Lake Hernando, where all the fishing's real good, Kanala Nui is a mouthful. So picking a traditional Hawaiian name made us fit in with some of the other Florida OC6 teams and outrigger canoe clubs. So you have Lokahi and Kainiani and Kanalui and so on. And I wanted a name that when we went to these events, we weren't the Hernando, outrigger canoe club or dragon boat club and so on. But again, knowing from the beginning that that's hard to pronounce, I wanted a cool acronym. So it's simple. It's got 1K and 2 N's, K2N. So that's been the acronym. It's Hawaiian for the big wave.
Cool. So how did the club get its start?
Yeah, so the inception of the club is based on the premise of paddling as a racer in Citrus County, Florida, with nobody else around. And I wanted to have other racers. And so in order to do that, you have to make them. I would come home from training on the lake and I would tell my father, hey, there's nobody else out there. It's so hard to stay motivated. It's so hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel just logging miles by yourself. And he said, if you showed somebody else how to do it, I'm sure they'd go out there with you, right? And it was just one of those things. When I first got that idea, I totally dismissed it. Like, oh, I'm not going to, train other people. Who's going to listen to some punk ass kid out in the middle of nowhere on how to learn to paddle, right? And so that idea got dismissed for a number of years before it began to progress. So the catalyst in that, unfortunately, is my father passed away. And when he did, in that grieving process, one of the ideas that stuck out in my head was unfinished business. What were the things that I didn't get to do while he was still alive? And that was one of them, was I didn't believe in myself enough to inspire and coach other people and kind of pass the torch, in a sense, of what paddle racing means to me, and bottling that up and giving it to the next person. So the first start after that was not immediately creating a club organization, but I started doing stand-up paddleboard lessons. So I bought a spare board, I would meet people, and I would give them a one-on-one lesson for an hour. But this didn't progress in the way that I had originally imagined, because you would spend all this time with the person, and it would be, you get to see them progress and get better. But a lot of time they would only do a lesson once or twice, and then they would never do it again, right? So you didn't get to kind of help them do their first race and go through that entire process with them. So they show up, it's a great moment, but then they leave, and that's the end of it. And that wasn't what I was trying to do. So I had to sit down and think, how can I competently get somebody that's shopping at Walmart to convince them to take up paddling? They don't know what I'm talking about. They don't know what boat or what vessel I'm talking about. Convince them to do it, get them to train for it, and then go through that entire series. And again, share that love and share that journey with them that I've gone through. And the answer was Dragon Boat. It was an affordable boat. It's hard to store. That's its own beast. But you can put 20 people in there with almost zero experience and kind of guide them through that process. Most individual boats have a balance demand. You have to steer. You have to make sure that you have some level of paddling to get you in and out of, tricky situations.
There's a lot more pressure on the individual too, to like keep up with other people. If everybody's in the same boat, that pressure isn't the same.
In the Dragon Boat, 20 people, you can have 20 first timers. And as long as they're somewhat competently paddling a little bit, it's going to be a successful outing, right? And so that was the original Inception, was creating a club, not just doing one-on-one lessons, right? Being able to progress with those people from the start until whatever the end of their journey is, or, ongoing indefinitely. And so the club setting, it started from absolutely nothing. There wasn't a bunch of paddlers out here and we all united around a round table and like, hey, the 15 of us, let's do this. It starts with one idea, right? And again, being open and compassionate and bringing these people in, being patient with them. These are all the catalysts that allow them to come in, feel accepted, and want to do it indefinitely, right? And it's the same kind of warmth that I felt early on in my paddling career. And again, it's something that if I can spend the rest of my life perpetuating it, then I've lived a decent, existence. So from there, probably about 4 years into the club's progression, people look at it and think, man, I wish I had that in my area, but we don't have it. And if I lived near you, I would love to be coached by you. I would love to be part of that. And that started the next idea and the next evolution, which was the K2N online paddle school. So the online paddle school is, again, trying to bottle up the knowledge that goes into being a successful paddler and giving people direction in their training and purpose in their pursuits, ultimately reaching people from all over the world. So remotely accessing somebody that's in the middle of the wilderness in North Carolina and there's no other paddlers, within 200 miles of them, being able to connect with that person and give them the same guidance as somebody that lives 10 minutes away from where I'm at currently. And so the online school has been a manifestation and an expansion of the club that we have locally, and trying to spread that message all over the world. That's kind of the amazing thing, is that I was just thinking, more rural parts of Florida. And then all of a sudden we have people in Australia, Singapore, South Africa, like all over, right? We got China. Like, I need to have a little map on the back of the podcast here and have like a little thumbtack for all the places.
That'd be cute.
And just kind of show the worldwide reach that the online school. But there's always been a demand for having concise technical knowledge readily available, right?
Yeah.
And that came with its own series of skills. Again, not a communication major, not a production manager. So having to figure out the lights that go into shooting video, microphones, which has developed and come a long way, apparently. And having those skills made it very easy to just transition into YouTube. So making YouTube videos was another outlet in reaching the largest possible demographic in sharing paddling knowledge and going forward from that aspect. And that seems to be kind of its own tumbleweed that has collected one more part, which is the podcast. So taking that community and giving them some more resources that might be a little bit outside of just pure technical talk, and now expanding that into the community aspect and spotlighting people, their experiences, their journey, and putting that all into perspective to give maybe new racers perspective on their future, or some veteran racers some perspective on what it's like to start the sport again, right? The landscape that we are in is ever changing. So the culture of joining in 2024 is vastly different than joining in 2012 or 2015 or 2019. Each year has its own little thing going on, and understanding that allows you to stay empathetic and stay ahead of it. So in the future, when more people join, you can kind of help facilitate that. If you cram down ideologies from 15 years ago on somebody, it doesn't work, and it's a huge turnoff. And I think some people that are in that time capsule lose sight of what you should be focusing on. So don't think about yourself, think about this new person. And I think this podcast will help shed some light with our future guests in that regard.
Yeah. So you talked about the start of K2N, but how did you start paddling? What was your first venture into the sport?
Yeah, so we definitely misguided that, because that was supposed to be the very first thing, and then it kind of segued perfectly into all this.
A little bit late, but it's fine. You didn't start off with all of the different paddle pursuits that you have now. Was it Dragon Boat? Was it SUP first?
So technically, in the lore, 2013, the first thing I ever paddled was a Dragon Boat. So the Lake Hernando Dragon Boat Festival is a big festival that we have going on here, and the company that I used to work for put on a community team, and I just got rounded up, and it was like, you should be in our boat. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I'll do it, right? And I almost didn't go, right? It's one of those things where I just maybe not. And so I did it, and it was okay. It was cool. I love Dragon Boat from the bottom of my heart. But even when I did it there, I didn't just jump out in 2013 I have to commit my life to this. I was like, that's a fun once-a-year thing. So I understand how many people feel about that festival, when they don't show up immediately after. I was there. I didn't jump right back into it.
Yeah. So
the real first step is the following year, same coworkers told me about stand-up paddleboard. And they showed me this brochure for Crystal River, Florida, to go look at manatees. And I'm looking at the brochure, and I was like, man, this is the lamest thing I have ever seen in my life. I was like, this is so dorky, right? And that was another one. I almost didn't go, because I'm like, And it was the weather was nice, and my other plans had canceled. And I was like, okay, I'll go do this, right? And I got on a 10'6" red YOLO board, and I never looked back. I got on, the moment I got up and stood up and paddled, the first thing that came to my head was, I have to own one, right? And the evolution of that was me being a cheap bastard. Okay. Like I was just like, this place is selling boards and it's like, this is going to be X amount. I'm like, man, you don't understand who I am. Like I'm so cheap, right? Especially back then. So I go on Craigslist and I type in stand-up paddle boards. And one of the cheapest ones that I could find was a 14-foot race board in Orlando, and it was another yellow board. And I agree, drive out there, and I meet him in Orlando, and he says, "Hey, oh no," I asked him. I said, "Hey, this is a race board. Like people race these things." And he's like, "Oh, definitely. I'm only selling this one because I got a narrower one." Oh, what's that mean? It means it's faster. I'm like, okay. Like immediately I'm already learning about the landscape.
Like starting to be competitive with people you haven't even met yet.
I don't even know what the sport is. And I'm like, okay.
I gotta win.
That's right. And so he was saying in a couple months, there is the Lake Mary Jane stand-up paddleboard competition. You should do it. And I was like, I'm all in, right? So I got the board. I went on the website. I signed up, and it was the 5K, which it was actually like 3 miles and a couple turns, right? And I trained for 2 months. I went out once a week, and I would paddle 3 miles in about 45 minutes. And I went out. Super cool event, super great, and I wish it still existed. But again, ever-changing landscapes, things come and go. The Lake Mary Jane was one of them. And so that was one of the things that got me sucked into it. Was I had a blast. It was super fun. It was cold and miserable, but everybody was so nice, right? And so from that point, what's the next race? And what's the next race? And it just kind of snowballed from that point. SUP at that point was a bubble. So there's money flying all around. It's like the invention of the kayak originally. Every household wants to own a stand-up paddleboard. So they go out and buy it. So some of these companies have an enormous amount of money to throw around at sponsored racers, prizes, travel fees, and so on. And I easily got sucked up into that to keep me interested. Like, hey, we'll give you X amount of money. Or, hey, we'll give you this board to race. And so that was a really cool experience for a complete novice, mind you. There was other people still whooping my butt. But getting the hang of it enough to be part of that culture so soon, I think was one of the things that enticed me from the beginning. And it's interesting because it's not really one of the defining motivators long term. But in the beginning, if it wasn't for that, I might not have completed the 2015 season, right? But that little bit of extra push from brands and organizations on, I have to do this for them type of a scenario. I think that was one of the things that made that first few steps a little more enticing. And then after that, there's no going back, right? It's like you're like falling down a hill, right? You just boom, 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 boom.
Who was your first like sponsored race board?
So I got a Nash 14 by 23, and then so like Nash, Florida, which I don't even think exists anymore outside of windsurfing or whatever. But that was one of them where they gave me, we had found a board, and then I had gotten a rebate from the primary company for it. Like it was crazy. It was like, dude, what am I, Kai Lenny? Come on, dude, sign me up, right? Like I'm God's gift to paddle. I paddle 4.9 miles per hour now. I'm freaking super fast.
So, before you had started the actual team and stuff, like, was it basically just training to win races? Like how much time were you basically devoting to it?
Yeah, and that's interesting because it's my first long distance endurance sport in my life, right? So the concept of that was a little lost on me in the beginning. So like training frequency and intensity and distances, all of that began to climb over a period of time, right? I was more of a drop dead sprinter type. So like anything longer than 18 seconds was like, ugh, this is miserable, right? And so I'd run cross country in high school, but again, that's only what, 14, 15. Okay, I'm more of a 16-minute guy. But nonetheless, it's not like paddling. 3 miles in paddling is like, if you're super fast on a SUP is like, what, 28 or 9 minutes, right? And so, I mean, it's like, it's agony after a certain bit. But most of the training was focused around races, the distances, and going towards that. And it was like the caveman discovering fire in the beginning. It's just like kind of scared of it more than utilizing it to its full potential. But over the years, I think training ideologies for me have been a lot more refined. But back then it was just like, I'm going to go out 3 times a week and paddle hard. Now it's like 2 a days trying to keep up with everybody.
But then you were just like, oh, you know what? I hate doing distance. I hate doing long stuff. Let me just stand on this paddleboard for 24 hours straight.
When back to my father, right? We saw this article. It might have been in the Stand Up Journal or Sup Racer, and the current world record holder for the men had recently completed it. And this is probably 2016, so I was still new into the sport. And we saw the article, and the first thought was like, "That's insane! Like, who would ever want to do that?" And then we would keep talking about it over time, 24 hours, and then all of a sudden we're like brainstorming, right? Like, what if, how would you do it? Where would you do it? And then how often would you eat? And then and those questions, it started to create an outline. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, let's see if the plan can work. And that was kind of the idea, was getting that motivation to create, the blueprint. And then you got to make it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to, if you're fabricating a boat, you got the blueprints up and this is all the screws and this is where we're putting the epoxy. You got to make it. You got to prove that your idea was right. And I think that was the culmination of that, was like, I can stay up for one day. Like, I'm not going to die. I hope. But it was, can somebody that started the sport 3 years ago stand up on a board and do something that kind of captures the imagination, right? Again, when I read that article, it was like, that is amazing. And when I was able to do it, it was, again, able to perpetuate that feeling to the next person. Like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And then, hopefully it inspired somebody to go out there and beat my record, which probably happened, but don't research it too much.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's the whole point, right? Is to inspire the next person to do better. That's what I'm here to do.
So after SUP, what was the next individual boat that you got into?
Oh yeah, so it's hard to say. I think it was prone paddling, which is more within that same vein, but more torture and slower.
Let's take something that's already kind of slow, kind of hard, and make it slower and harder.
That's exactly
and somehow
right.
more tippy.
That's exactly right. Yep. So
colder if it's cold outside.
When we're looking at different paddle sports, right? You got you got the running boat, you got the jogging boat, and then the power walking board, and then the crawling board, right? So if you ever think a 5K isn't hard enough, get down on your stomach and army crawl for as long as you can, right? That's what prone paddling feels like. You get a little more glide than being on actual, asphalt on your chest, but it's the same agony. But yeah, so sup to prone, and then I believe the next one that I owned was a surf ski. Then it was the outrigger canoe, and then it's kind of spiraled from there. Fortunately, it's club inventory, so I don't seem like a hoarder anymore. I'm using this stuff for other people to use. Most of it was opportunity, so I was able to get the prone board for almost nothing. And the concept of the cross training fascinated me for 24-hour paddling, because I didn't want to spend so much mileage that I got burnt out before paddling that. So mixing that up with prone, which was like, oh, if I do 3 miles of this, it's really like 10 miles of anything else, right? So I was able to condense these workouts from ultra long distances to kind of a shorter, higher intensity, the intensity based on the difficulty of the motion. And then progressing into the surf ski and the outrigger canoe.
So when you started actually as a coach, you own K2N, you start coaching. How did you come up with how you were going to coach other people? Did you learn from the coaches in your high school sports? Because it's very different just, learning yourself rather than trying to teach somebody else something you've already learned.
Right. Yeah, I would say I've probably had a knack for being empathetic enough to see when somebody doesn't understand you. And I think that's the important key, is you can say something, and if you're empathetic to understand that they don't understand you, it is now up to you to rephrase it, to re-say it, to explain it, to show it, whatever the tool is, and it challenges yourself to keep doing something different to try and get the positive result that you want. And I've seen dozens of coaches work with athletes right in front of me, from playing t-ball to playing high school football to wrestling and track and weightlifting. Probably my most technical coach is my wrestling coach, right? Second behind that would be weightlifting, because the Olympic clean and jerk is a very complicated motion. And then so learning those nuanced motions and watching them teach other people, I think set the framework in my head on, you're taking somebody that doesn't know what you're talking about, right? And you have to simplify it. You have to make it palatable for them and remain empathetic, because not everybody gets it. Some people, you can think of an idea and they read your mind and they do it better than you. And those are like almost pro athletes, right? And then other people, you talk to them for 9 months and they have no idea. They're just looking at you like, what are you talking about? Like, the whole blade in the water, and then they put the handle in the water. It's just like, you're doing great, and I
What do you mean I have to use my hips? I'm sitting down.
That's right. Yeah, using hips, and then people are just like, like dancing. Like,
I don't do that.
I don't dance, man. So, so teaching other people, when people observe me doing it, they always say that it's a gift. And I think the gift is not the coaching or the teaching part. It is the empathy part. Like, the more empathy you have, the more patience you have, and the more you put it on yourself to make those adjustments for the other person. If you lack empathy, if they don't understand you, you call them stupid, you don't get it, I'm right, you're wrong, go find something else to do. And you'll see coaches get very frustrated with people because they don't get them immediately. They almost take it as an insult, versus for me, it's like a little personal challenge. And it's great, because if you reach somebody that's kind of a hard learner, you can always put that in your back pocket for the next hard learner, right? And I think that's what's made the online school and the YouTube channel so successful, is everybody is watching a very refined process. Like, I have said these words to 1,000 people.
You've been asked every question under the sun and figured out how to answer it after answering it 100 times.
Exactly. And then you get to take that nice refined project and give it to somebody. Hey, I know you're looking at those Lay's potato chips here at Walmart, but you would be a great prospect for our Dragon Boat team. And then they come out to the lake and you hit them with 100 words and boom, they look like they've been paddling for a year. A new first timer comes out, watches them, and is like, man, I want to be good like that guy. They turn around, they're like, I've been here 3 days. And it's a cool experience, right? And so again, kind of bottling up this neat skill and ability and giving it to people. That's why I remain empathetic. Like, I want them to have this cool skill that I've kind of managed to learn on my own. So if I can give it to them, that's, the ultimate reward.
I think maybe something else that keeps you empathetic is like, you are constantly learning, even though you've been doing SUP for how long now. Like, recently you're just like, oh, I'm just going to try to figure out how to paddle a high knee canoe. And like, nothing is more humbling than getting in one of those things and barely being able to balance and then trying to figure out how to steer the darn thing. So I feel like just finding different ways to humble yourself also keeps you empathetic.
And I do want to point out that it's not a high knee canoe, it's a sprint canoe.
Whatever.
Christina. Okay. Somebody said it was a high knee canoe, Theo Byrne, and you've got me in trouble with 1,000 people. And I'm going to track down whoever told me what a river canoe is, because Robert, it's a marathon canoe. I get messages 3 times a month. Oh, it's a nice river canoe. Like, okay, it's a canoe for the river. I don't want to go on a tangent. It's a sprint canoe. Sprint
canoe, C1 canoe,
yeah.
High knee canoe.
It's the Olympic.
The scary thing where you're on one knee and you fall into the water is what I do.
You just got to have a really good brace. But you're right. The whole progression, if I'm good at multiple sports, it is only because when I went to the next one, I was willing to start as a complete novice. You carry over some of the skills, but you don't carry over many of them. That'll be a talking point that we have in the future, where you'll have a superstar athlete in one discipline, they go to the other one, and they don't stay around forever. Because why would you go from being a champion to being a novice when you can just hold on to the other discipline, right? And luckily for me, I like being bad at everything. So I have no problem getting into when I first started surf ski, that was an entire mess. But now when you watch it, it's like, oh, that guy kind of knows what he's doing, right? Outrigger canoe was the same. Like, what in the world? Why is his armpit touching the water? Like, I don't know. But going through those little, hurdles for myself, again, you're right. It is humbling, but I don't have this personal expectation that I have to be good immediately. I'm okay with kind of slowly going through, being a novice to get to that light at the end of the tunnel. And it's not to win races. The idea is if I can learn it, I can teach it to somebody else, or I can help somebody else be better at it and take, again, this cool skill and pay it forward, right? So, it's always about trying to funnel all of that into a positive, because for me, that's the most motivating thing, right? Trying to win races can easily become a negative, right? Because you're always going to be chasing something that might not have an end resolution, right? So if you can give somebody a positive experience, that's always something that you can latch on to keep going. So we're going to flip the script, because I've been talking for, how long I've been talking for now?
31 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Right on. I could feel the halfway point start to elapse, right? So now we're going to flip the switch, talking about the club setting, talking about being a coach, right? Now we're going to take one of K2N's star students. Have you won the MVP award? Oh, you have. You were most valuable paddler last year, right?
No.
Were you not?
No, you gave me the Spirit Award 2 years ago.
2 years. I didn't give you MVP last year at Pepper's house?
I don't think so.
I think I gave you MVP. Who was MVP then?
We're gonna have to go back to that. No, it was Hank.
No, he was the most. Oh no, 2 years ago then.
You gave me Spirit Award.
Okay. Yep. Christina's
I'm good at encouraging people.
Okay, so Christina, obviously one of our higher end racers. I have the Chattajack Trophy behind me from 2022, the cool space one that I didn't win because I'm not fast enough. But Christina got one in the kayak class. Congratulations. So tell us about your start in the sport, and you can't be sappy and say anything about the coach.
Okay. Well, it was 2019. I was looking for basically a new hobby. Like, I love my nerdy hobbies. I like playing D&D. I like, I had a whole Magic card collection, all that stuff. But I was looking for something to get me outside more, like work on this tan. So I went on to Facebook and I was like, hey, give me some recommendations. It was like one of those local Facebook pages, and one of the girls on the team, Rebecca, was like, hey, I'm part of a dragon boat club. It's a lot of fun. You should really come out and try it. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, whatever. So I looked at the K2N dragon boat page and I was like, I don't know. This looks like a sport. Like, I don't do sports. What's that? But I don't know. It was nice that Rebecca had actually reached out, and she's like, you should really come try this. And she was one of the only people who actually suggested anything on that page. So I was like, whatever, I'll try it. And if I don't like it, it's in the middle of nowhere. I'm never going to see these people again. I don't care. So I showed up, and it was a Dragon Boat Day, and it was a week before, I think, Mount Dora or one of those events. And then
did you participate?
No. It was but the practice was for 500 meters. So it was a really hard practice. But I was having fun. There was adrenaline. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this an actual shot. So I ended up coming back a couple more times. Somebody was like, oh, we've got this outrigger canoe thing over here. You just have to let Robert know ahead of time, because there's only 6 seats. During that time, there really weren't a lot of people who were using the OC2. It was basically OC6 or nothing on those days. So I was like, yeah, I want to try it. And I ended up liking outrigger canoe more than dragon boat. The very first time that I got into it, I was like, oh my gosh, I get to switch sides. I don't know. I just really latched onto outrigger canoe. But of course, I was part of the dragon boat team. So the first event that I went to was Rick's on the River, Like, it was just this little small event. I think there was like maybe 10 teams there or something like that. Like, it wasn't like one of those big events, because it was just like a locally run race, and I had a lot of fun there. I was part of the cotton t-shirt era before we got, like actual t-shirts.
Yeah, before dry fits.
Oh
yeah.
my gosh, it was like, I think it was in July or something like that, cotton t-shirt. It was crazy, but I had so much fun. I was like, okay, I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to be part of the team like permanently. And then so that was in July, and then I just kind of, kept showing up to practices and stuff. And then at the end of 2019, like the very end, Robert was like, "Oh, we've got these surf skis." So people had started to very nicely donate some of their older equipment. Like, we had what we called the bathtub affectionately, because it was like this, wider sit-in kayak, and it was very heavy, very hard to get to the water, but it was still fun. And but that wasn't even the first one that I got into. I got into what we called the Christmas boat, because it was a red Futura that literally the top of it had been like cut out, like with probably a jigsaw or something like that, and then it was what was the top of it? It was green.
It's some sort of like, it's not a tarp, but it's like a tarp that you can heat up, and it makes like a very stiff frame shape. And then the person did that to reduce the weight. So the fiberglass in those older boats, instead of just using like 2 or 3 layers like they do today, they use like 7 layers. So the boat was made of fiberglass and carbon fiber, and it weighs like 50 pounds. So they cut out all of the stuff on the top and put the green. So the red and green made a little Christmas tree looking boat. So thus the Christmas boat was. And Johnny Sheehan, if you're still listening, I appreciate you owning that boat now.
Yeah, so it was one of those older surf skis where like you get the size according to your leg length. So like it had to be like taken apart, and wood blocks had to be added in so that the rudder pedals were actually to where my feet could reach, because
you
it was
needed,
way
like, a
too big
booster
for
seat
me
to reach
Yeah,
it,
well,
yeah.
we tried the booster seat thing, and it made
That
it
didn't work.
impossibly
Yeah,
tippy
yeah.
because
Yeah, you would sit 6 inches
I
higher.
was like, "Ah." But yeah, so then literally less than a month later, I went to my first race. We've got this little organization that's called the FCPA, Florida Competition Paddlers Association. And it was just like this little race, and it's about to roll around again on the next year. It's on the Withlacoochee, in the middle of nowhere. And, it was just so much fun. Like, there wasn't that many people there, and everybody was just really nice, really happy to see new faces out there on the water. And so yeah, I like fell in love with surf ski like pretty much immediately. And just kept going to the FCPA races. You had the end of the year party, and you were talking about like, I want to bring more people to Chattajack with me this year, because that year you had gone with the OC6. It was the 2019 year. They had such a cool video. I watched that video so many times. I was like, oh my goodness, I know those people in that OC6. And I was just so pumped up. I was like, I'm going to do it next year. Like 2020, I'm going to do it. I don't care what I'm doing it in, but, I'm going to figure out how to do 32 miles, because 32 miles sounds like a lot when the longest race you've done is like 6 miles.
Mhm.
But I was like, it just like, that was my motivation. I was like, I'm going to do Chattajack this year. And unfortunately, 2020 didn't really work out for Chattajack, but I just kept training. Like I still do love surf ski a lot, but we spent a lot of time in the outrigger canoe, and yeah.
So Christina went over a lot of cool points of the track that the club setting here in Hernando has for K2N members, right? Everybody starts with Dragon Boat. It is the easiest way. If they have no paddling background, we get them in that boat as soon as possible. And then we trick them. Hey, we have a 6-person boat. It's more exclusive, and we paddle further, and it's tougher, and we're racing, and Coach Robert gets pissed if we're losing. And that progresses into, hey, you could probably paddle a tandem boat with me or with this person who has experience. And then all of a sudden, you're out there by yourself. And then the goals start to set in. Oh, hey, do the short course. Hey, the long course isn't that bad. And then aiming for Chattajack. And for us here, regionally, Chattajack is about an 8-hour drive. So it becomes our little pilgrimage, right? It's like the Boston Marathon for us. And the event is super cool, but the idea around it is what makes it special for our club is it gives people a purpose in paddling throughout the tough months of the year. When it's hotter than hell in Florida, you see people not show up as much. But when you have this looming threat in the fog that is 32 miles at Chattajack, it gives you this motivation and accountability that is the catalyst from going from a novice paddler to a good paddler. And a lot of people kick the can on that. I'll do Chattajack next year. And that means that this year they're not going to log in the miles, the time, the intensity, or the urgency, and they may not reach that hurdle, right? And then next year, but this is going on. And so paddlers that are able to capture that ideology quickly are the ones that progress the fastest within our organization. And that being said, it is not mandatory to be good at K2N. Like, I just want people to have a good time and enjoy it. But it's cool to allow and facilitate high-end racers with first-timers and let people go wherever they want on the spectrum. Christina's first time at practice, we're racing in a few days. So the majority of the team is up there honing the blade. Christina's like, how do I hold the paddle? And what are we doing? And that's what makes Dragon Boat so cool is you can put these first timers in seat 10 and it's like, hey, if you stop paddling, it's no big deal. Like this boat is going to be a rocket ship.
You said that on my first day because I didn't stop paddling and I definitely wanted to.
I tell everybody, you probably were just like captured by peer pressure. You're like, I can't show weakness on the first day, but it's cool. Like you don't have to know what you're doing, and the boat's a rocket ship, right? And it's cool sitting there and seeing it work in such a precise way, like a well-oiled machine, right? And then integrating that aspect I think is important. When you segregate your new racers, it makes them feel stupid, right? And they shouldn't, because they're not. There's no inability; they just haven't had the time yet, right? And I think that's an idea that I try to push on everybody, is everybody in this club all started as a novice and somebody helped you along. So when you get to a certain point, you don't just leave the stratosphere and float around in space and look down on everybody. You're still kind of here with us, right? So if you think that you have gotten this cool skill, you should turn around and try to pay it forward for the next person so you have more camaraderie and community and so on, right? It's the same ideology that I have. And it's something that I hope to impart on, the members of K2N. And again, you get this huge snowball effect where you start with one, and now you have hundreds of people that, are influenced by this ideology. So it's great hearing from Christina about her experiences, and it's a platform and a blueprint that if we could replicate that with everybody, we would have the largest organization in the world, and it would be awesome. And I would have 1,000 wives, right?
Yeah, okay. We don't live in Utah, so sorry.
Wait, we don't?
No.
I think we can get a marriage license for that. Okay, let's get back on subject. So talking about your experiences, and this is probably one of the coolest questions, and if anybody's made it this far, there is the solo paddling and team paddling dynamic. And then there are gender demographics that gravitate to one and the other. In solo paddling, we all sit around the campfire and we look at each other and like, man, why are there so many dudes that do this? And where are the girls at? And then in group paddling, we all sit by the campfire. Why is it only women that are out here? And why can't we get men on our Dragon Boat team or get men interested in the OC6? So what do you think is one of the driving forces that divides the gender split between the team paddling dynamic and then the solo paddling dynamic?
I think there's a lot at play that in the background. Like, I think that a lot of times women aren't taught like that they should value themselves enough to like explore like their power in their own like abilities, basically. So like a lot of people will show up to dragon boat practice and they'll be part of a team, and part of it is just like they do it because they want to be a part of something. And then I'm sure that for a lot of people, they don't feel confident enough to put themselves out there and be in a boat completely by themselves, where things are a little bit more scary when you're by yourself. It's very enlightening to be out there and be like, okay, this is every bit of speed is what I put into this boat. And if I'm not fast, I can't blame it on the sink of the team. I cannot blame it on anybody else besides me. So, there's that. There's a lot of like, oh, well, I can only devote this much time into it because I've got a family to take care of, or I have other obligations or whatever. I can't just drop everything and put hours of time into making myself a better paddler by myself, but I can dedicate like, a couple of hours per week to show up to dragon boat practice.
The confidence, it's a good one, and it also plays into women and men's risk assessment, and how guys are more willing to put themselves into those scary, dangerous positions, which is kind of a prerequisite to getting in any boat that is probably going to capsize at some point. Like, and if you never do, you never really paddled it, right? Like, if you're paddling hard in anything, you're eventually going to go swimming. And women, being smarter, stand on the shore and they cross their arms and they're like, I don't want to do that because the reward does not outweigh the risk, right? And guys are more willing to just like, yeah, I'll jump off the cliff. Like, why? I think there's water at the bottom. Like, dude, you gotta, I'm going. And so they're willing to put like, and I don't know if confidence in the risk assessment and stuff, looking at like the extremes of like downwinding, explaining downwinding to your rational, normal human, they all say, why? Because it's fun, but you could die, right? And it's a real risk. Like if your safety fails you, your mortality is in question, right? But we're willing to do it because it's fun, right? And not a lot of people define the terms of that and conclude with it's fun, so I'm going to go for it, right? And so on a smaller scale, obviously, paddling on flat water for the first time in your boat, there is still this, risk and reward that everybody weighs. And men versus women, I think, kind of gravitate between the two. The other aspect being the social dynamic.
Yeah. So like there are a lot of really good lady OC1 paddlers, but I feel like that's a direct result of them doing it so that they can, contribute better to a team dynamic. Like they're already either part of a dragon boat team or they're part of an OC6 team. Like I feel like there's a lot more OC6 ladies teams than there are OC6 men's teams, at least in the United States, at least geographically, like where we're at. So I feel like that lends to more lady OC1 paddlers than lady surf ski paddlers, because there's not really a team that they would specifically be training for. So if you are training as an OC1 or as a surf ski paddler as a lady, you're doing it 100% because you like it and because you want to be good for you, basically. Like,
and it has the risk reward. There's no AMA, right? You remove that dynamic, and now you're just out there on your own. It's scary. Why am I doing this? They don't make a 20-person kayak. They don't make a 6-person kayak racing team. They do have a K4, but sprint racing is another topic that we're going to talk about, and it is almost non-existent where we're at. So if you can find 4 kayaking ladies that want to do 500 meters, that's a miracle in itself in Florida. But there's no infrastructure. So like you said, there's no team dynamic. So like you said, most OC1 paddlers, they have the AMA, which is kind of safe. And I'm doing this for my team dynamic. Remove the team dynamic, they might not end up in that scenario, right? And within K2N, that's one of the driving forces on why surf ski is not as popular as it could be, is most of our racers. Why do I do OC1 or OC2? So I can get a seat in the OC6. So I can get a seat in the Dragon Boat. I'm going to be judged on my skill in this. I got to spend time doing it. You remove the team dynamic. Why would you get in it, right? You'd have to like it, and that's a whole different beast to try and, get people interested in.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like the first like progression into less stable surf skis for me was like, oh, I want to conquer this. Like I
stubborn. You have to be stubborn.
I saw your SES and I was like, I'm gonna learn how to paddle this.
And 16.4 wide, and Coach Robert makes it look so easy. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, and that was before we really had anything in between. That was like the next step beyond the Epic V10 Sport, which is how
18.9. Yeah, so you go from a true intermediate to a true advanced surf ski. Like that's a drop off of a cliff.
And I at first I was like, I didn't care if I was paddling it well. I just wanted to stay on top of the thing because to me that was like a victory in and of itself. And then once I had gotten used to it and could paddle it, like I really liked that boat. And then we went through a couple other boats and I was like, no, I want that one.
Yeah, the surf ski for stubbornness, I would say 3 out of 4 paddlers, if you ask them how they got started in surf ski, it started with a defiance to being beat by a tippy craft, right? Especially the older the paddlers are, no offense to anybody, but if you started in like 2000, every boat was designed to make you fall out of it. Like everybody's like, hey, let's make the meanest boat that has ever existed. We want it narrow. We want you 9 inches off the water. We want single foot wells, right? And everybody got in it, fell out. And they're like, I have to figure this out. And they devote an unknown amount of time to figuring it out. Because when we think, like, when you ask people, it's like, oh yeah, it didn't take me long. And it's just like, in real life, it took them like 2 years to like get in the boat and be comfortable and be fast in it all in. But when we think about it in rose tinted lenses, it's more, oh, it was really quick. Okay, we have mail coming, and I don't know if the lady's about to knock. Our doorbell doesn't work, and I think she just hit the doorbell button. Thank you, U.S. Postal Service. So, with the surf ski, everybody being stubborn. That's the number one thing. If you remove stubbornness, because not all people are stubborn, easygoing, go with the flow, they fall out of the boat, and they're like, this is the universe telling me this isn't for me, right? And that's not always the way it is. So, within the club infrastructure now, we have very accommodating wide boats. And then getting through that, you don't have to worry about the balance in it, like literally falling out, but it's going to fight you a little bit, right? Like it's an unstable, platform that you're trying to move through. And then surf ski gets pretty complicated. You got 2 blades, you got to move properly. Coach Robert won't shut up, means I'm probably doing something wrong. Like this is, it can be infinitely frustrating because it's like the single blade is much simpler because you have a recovery phase. You go through a motion, you reload the motion, and you go through it again, right? In kayak, not so much. It's just kind of just like you wailing on it because one stroke leads to the next, but that gets very complicated. Like if you're going to learn jump rope, you don't go through the double Dutch with the little girls at the park because they're just about to whip you, right? You start with your own little 1, and then you stop, and then you reload it, and 2 versus double Dutch is just boom, 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 boom. So, what is our time at so far?
54 minutes.
Is there anything that you wanted to add about that topic on gender demographics and how people gravitate towards one or the other? Do you think there's a way to solve that idea? Is it human nature that kind of dictates that, and it's something that we have to address and try to work around as opposed to change? What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I don't know if there's obviously not a simple or easy solution, or else it would have already been solved. But I mean, like, something that we struggle with as a team, I would say, is like it's hard to get like guys to want to sit in the boat with all of these other people. Like there's not that many guys that are like, wow, I really need some more friends to hang out with and talk on the water with, or so it's just like, okay, how do we trick them into wanting that? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, you have the competitive aspect, like the outlet of winning races and being part of that team. Most people, once they get the hang of it, they want to be in control of their own destiny. I want to be in my own boat, so my results are mine, not hauling 19 people to victory, right? And it depends, like it however your mindset gets, you can get very jaded about it. And I've had these conversations, over a course of time where if you feel like you're the best paddler in the boat, some people gravitate and love that. I am the big fish, right? And some people hate it because they're like, look, I'm a little fish. And if I'm the biggest one in this boat, it's not something that they want to stick around with and wait for everybody to develop in, right? The more empathy you have, the more you're going to let that snowball build. And it becomes impossible to stop at a certain point, right? But if everybody jumps ship too early, now it doesn't gain that same traction. So that's some insight into our personal club experiences that may or may not mirror your own. That is about an hour for us. So there's obviously other things that we could discuss. If you all wanted to see Christina and I talking about the club and running organizations in general, starting an organization and kind of progressing through some of the social dynamics, potential pitfalls, stuff like that, we could definitely fill another hour at some point, but we're going to kind of pull the plug on this one. If there are any things that you want to see, we have 20 people lined up. If Christina can reach the paper for me. If you're on YouTube, you can hear it though. Yeah, you can hear it.
That sounds like a lot of people
There's
crinkling.
a lot of people on here. All of them got check marks. Don't zoom in on that, actually. I don't want to spoil that. Actually, I'm going to edit that out. But we have a whole lineup. So 20 people have agreed to be on the show. That's going to be half the year. We're going to alternate between long distance and inland paddlers and ocean racing and team organizers, race organizers, etc., outrigger canoe, surf ski, try to get some prone people to talk to me, teach me how to do prone. So we're excited to do this and to let it keep evolving. If you can stick around, give us some tips, advice, talking points. This is designed for the community at large. We want to tailor it to our listeners and our viewers, and we want to thank you all so much for being part of it. Right now, we're just doing it for the fun of it, right? We've discussed doing like a Patreon where if you pay $1 a month or something, it helps support the channel. So if that's something you're interested in doing, let me know, and I'll try to strategize some sort of small funding to offset the cost of the initial startup and just support the channel in general. I think that's it.
I think you need an outro like, see you on the water.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much for joining us. This is, of course, brought to you by the K2 and OnlinePaddleSchool.com. If you want to support us today, sign up, get a technique review. Video review is a great way to look at what you're doing. We try to fix it. Access 200 videos, 100 drills, monthly training plans. Check out the website today. Sign up for a service. Help feed my dog. Can't believe the cat didn't jump up on the table today. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much. We'll try to get the next video out within about a week. It might end up being bi-weekly, but we'll take it one step at a time. See you guys on the next Paddle Pursuit.
Bye.
Dude, we did